All right, we're back into another Dragon Ball Super card game video. Today, I am not alone. We got another topping deck profile discussion, interview, whatever you want to call it. Hey, who's there?
Hey, it's
Anthony. What's up? I don't know where I was going with that intro, but whatever. Hopefully people don't skip it. Hey, Anthony. You played Vegeta. How about you introduce yourself and where you're from? Everything else we talk about.
I'm from Down Under, Melbourne, Australia. I've been playing this game since the start of set 2 and have been loving it all the time. Traditionally, I've been a blue player, even at the hardest of times where blue's been having to fight through things like TN and all the various blue hate around and all the good times as well. And I think blue is in a really, really awesome format. So I was looking for the best blue deck, and I came across this leader a few months ago, just prior to when the ban list happened. And I was thinking, well, they announced there's going to be a ban list. I suspect it's going to slow the format down. What leader can best take advantage of that? And I looked into a bunch of different ideas, and I ended up falling onto this leader, and I have not looked back.
Right. And people will say in the comments or somewhere else when you mentioned slow, when we now have a OTK deck, supposedly, but we're going to ignore those people. And one thing to mention is that this was the online TAC regional. You did get top 4 with it. My man is in a whole entire different country than where this is being held. So really big props to him to have that commitment and to play through these rounds and get this placing as well.
Waking up at just before 5 a.m. for a 5 a.m. start is not fun.
Exactly. So yeah, moving on to the leader. We do have the actual Vegeta leader. For those who don't know, he draws on the unawakened side. When you deal damage, you get to place a mono blue card after you look at the top, and then place in an energy, and you awaken at 4 or less with only drawing 1 card. The other side is the same, but now when they encounter, you get to switch to active mode. So you were talking about some interactions earlier. What's some important stuff to know about this leader going for this?
Okay, so the big advantage of this leader is that blue has now so many tools to untap energy that you don't actually require another leader to specifically untap energy if you know what energy to use and how. So Soul Striker doing it on your turn, SS3 doing it at the end of your turn. It's all well and good as like a sit-back safeguard, but if you feel that you don't need that safeguard, this leader provides an enormous amount more value. The ramp that you're getting does not come at the cost of card advantage, so you can generally build up a very, very big hand size with this leader. It's weird because you're like, big hand size, you only draw 1 when you awaken. Typical hand size for this deck is anywhere between 9 and 14 cards, depending on matchup. It's quite large. And the reason that happens is because every time that you play a card that you attempt to ramp with, whether it be pushing with a UI Kamehameha or something like that, you are drawing a card to replace it. And if your opponent chooses to prevent you from ramping, they are losing cards in their hands because generally they're not using their super combos on turn 1 and 2. They're dumping a whole lot of hand size to try and stop it. And you end up getting a huge amount of value for free, even if you don't get the ramp off. But getting the extra ramp basically turns you into a combination of SS3 that ramps with the hand size of Soul Striker, just with a little bit less energy manipulation.
Right. And we can talk through that for the list. And I'm sure it's going to take a little bit of practice as far as to get that down as well. But here's a list for those who want it. Goodbye. We'll see you another time. But for those who actually want some more information and actually how to play the deck, there's a lot of things going on here because, you know, we have a lot of one-ofs. I talked about this before I mentioned it. The first thing I even saw, or the first thing I even noticed was the one-ofs when I first saw the list. But even having the results of training. But we have a lot of good blue stuff. A lot of cool, interesting techs like the 1-drop Boo and as well as the 7-drop Boo as well. Talk to us about, you know, what's the MVP of the deck, or, you know, what's some cool interactions with this.
Well, MVP of the deck is the Unison Agents of Destruction Majin Buu, and Majin Buu happens to be my favorite character in all of Dragon Ball, and so when I saw he was getting a Unison, I was really, really hyped, and when I saw the Unison was really, really good, I was even more hyped, and when I realized I could play it on turn 3, I was like, yes, I have to play this card on turn 3. So, yeah, that is definitely the the most powerful and really best card in the deck. However, the other core engine, if you wanted to say an engine to this deck, the core, and then build around it however you want to change it, the core is the Unison, the Boo package, and the Galactic Buster package. Like, you cannot take those out if you want this deck to function the way it does here. Because those engines, typically you don't want to put multiple engines in together in one deck because it can get clunky. These engines are unique. They are not clunky together. Because you want to charge the 7-drop Boo as it gets played from your energy, you end up having it as an extra Galactic Buster target either in the early or in the late game just for extra combo power. So it just tends to be there and be ready for that. And the 1-drop in the early game is another cantrip that you can use to dig through your deck. So worst case scenario is you play it, draw a card, and as a result, it's like an engine that fits in with Galactic Buster without needing to compromise on any ratios or any potential other slots in your deck. And the engine is really powerful. For those who don't know what the 1-drop and 7-drop do, the 1-drop draws a card, and then for 3 energy, you have an activate main that you can choose to play a 7-drop Boo from your energy. If you do, you can grab a Sun Gohan Adolescence from your deck and place it in your drop, and then place that 1-drop into your energy in rest mode. The 7-drop comes out with its own auto, and it comes out and says, when this card is played, choose 1 battle card from your drop and place it under this card. So you grab the Gohan Adolescence, you put it underneath, and then choose 1 of your energy and switch it to active mode. So total energy output, if you do it all in one turn, costs you 3 energy. You need 4 total, but 3 because it untaps 1. And then when it swings, it sucks up an opponent's battle card underneath it and restands for a 25k triple strike that can swing twice. If the 1-drop's already on the board, it's 3 energy required, costing you 2, and the amount of value it generates is more than just about any other big blue boss monster in the game. And if you're worried about things like God Sealing, because you get so much energy in this deck, you can always just pay 3 and then say response. And when they activate the God Sealing, you say, okay, I won't play Boo, and then pay another 3 and do the whole thing again, and they can't stop it. Because the wording says that you may play a Boo from your energy if you do place this card in your energy in rest mode. If you don't, you can just pay 3 again. So the Boo engine is a core engine to the deck. As of the one-offs, the one-offs are not just tech. They are more cards that you either don't need to see or can't afford to run more than one-off. Baby Hatch is the SCR because it is the best SCR in the game. And especially for a deck like this that wants to get to those later turns, being able to shut off an opponent's turn is amazing. Knowing the fact that there are a lot of potentially good blue decks in the current format, I thought it was prudent to put in one of the 1-drop Borgos into the deck, and even main it even if it was best of 3, just for those Soul Strikers and SS3s and other blue decks that want to be reliant on D-Magic and Mechie Orb and other things to untap and keep going. And it often comes in handy if you were to come up against a random baby matchup.
Right.
Protector of the People is in there at once simply because of the King Vegeta deck, the potential deck in there. I would like this deck to be completely mono blue, and previous versions were completely mono blue. But because we've got a potential turn 2 kill deck, you need to have Bean at 4 and Protector in there just to add the extra. Essentially, it's another copy of Bean that can shut off their turn and get you to those later turns. As for the other one-offs, the SS4 Goku Unison is a easier, cheaper mass barrier removal. And it couples really, really well with Android 17, especially if you wanted to bounce their board and then the following turn bounce their board again and then wipe their hands, and it kind of just ends the game on the spot. Now, SS4 is like not used as often as what you'd think, but it is necessary for some matchups. For example, if you were to come up against a yellow Jiren deck, SS4 will win you the game because it'll bounce all their barrier dudes and leave their leader wide open. If they're running like barrier revenge blockers or things that you don't want your Bojacks or Boos to swing into, then yeah, SS4 will do the trick again. Probably the spiciest couple one-offs in the deck are a result of training in Tragedy Overground. Tragedy Overground is my favorite card in the deck, which is weird because you play it for 9 energy, but against most decks, it just turns off the deck. If you land it against Dark Broly, they just scoop because they can't play the game anymore. If you run it, if you do it against Hatch, probably the same thing is going to happen. If you run it against, like if you just look at all the different decks one by one and just say, This deck runs things that have cost 4 or more. It can't play. That deck does that too. It can't play either. And so they literally just can't play the game. And it really only has 2 answers to it. The only two answers to it are the Xeno Cosmic Unison, or the opponent playing Tragedy back on top of you. If they don't have those, then Tragedy is just going to win you the game when you drop it. Result of Training is a very, very old card from set 1, and is a card which, for all other purposes, has been completely power crept out of the game by all the self-awakening leaders and all the self-awakening 1-drops and all the other different awakening conditions, so no one needs Result of Training anymore. This leader can get to 5 energy on turn 3, turn 4 at the latest, and very often does so with more than 4 life, depending on matchup. And against any remotely slower and control matchup, they will try and stall you out because your leader is so much more powerful on the awakened side that they will prefer to leave you an extra turn or 2 if they can on your unawakened side to try and get control of the game in some way. If you happen to hit Result of Training on that and you suddenly awaken, it completely throws off their game plan. And if they leave, for example, up 1 negate with the intention of negating your leader swing so that you can't ramp, but you Result of Training first, you awaken, and then you swing, and they go, oh, now if I negate, the leader is going to restand. And you're like, oh, so I needed 2 negates. That didn't help. Result of Training is just one of those surprise weapons that people never see coming, and you're suddenly staring down SS4 at 5, 6, sometimes even more than that amount of life, and it's doing all the things that it wanted to do at 4 life, because this deck's happy to be at 4 life, but if you let it go more, then absolutely it will. But yeah, those are all the one-offs. In terms of the more staple cards, we've got God Sealing here at 3. I didn't think we needed it at 4 just because you see it enough. The deck actually draws quite a lot of cards. If you run through most of the cards in the deck, a lot of them say draw a card in some form or another. So like Golden Ape says draw a card, Borgo says draw a card, Bojack says draw a card, Galactic Buster says draw a card, SS4 Vegeta says draw however many cards you might want from there. Like you could draw 1, you could draw 4. The SS4 Goku draws a card, the 1-drop Boo draws a card, the Unison draws a card, the UI Kamehameha draws a card, the Xeno Super Combo draws a card. Like virtually everything in the deck draws cards, so you don't need more than 3. For this leader, the SS4 6-drop is an extremely important card, and I have seen some SS4 lists where they try to cut this card for some reason, and I don't understand why. This card is a stabilizing card or a setup card, depending on what route you want to take. If you're playing against hand control, dropping this and drawing 4 cards really puts a stop to a lot of their ideas of running your hand down. And if you're playing against something a little bit slower, or you need to be able to get to a specific win con, then setting up the right amount of energy for that win con is crucial. So, for example, if you're playing against a blue matchup and your intention is to drop an aandroidd 17, but you're afraid that they're going to have that one random Jiren in their deck, then ramping up to 11 energy when you play it, which is not hard to do, because when you play it for 6, you can, if you want to, you can charge all 4 of them, get to 10 energy, and then on your following turn, charge the 11th energy. And the 11 energy means that if you've got a 1-drop Boo on the board, then you can also, if you have 1-drop Boo in your hand, then you can go aandroidd 17 followed by play a 1-drop Boo, play an aandroidd 17, then tap 3 for the big Boo after the aandroidd 17. If you get to that magic 12th energy, then they actually can't stop aandroidd 17 because you aandroidd 17 with it backed up by a baby ape. In which case you can say, well, your Jiren that you hung on to all game did nothing. But probably the more common play with the SS4 is to charge at least 2 of the energy that you see, simply because, 2 of the cards that you see, because you might need 2 of those cards to add to your hand to defend yourself for the next turn, and the other 2 puts you at 8 energy, which means you can charge energy number 9, and energy number 9 means next turn you drop Tragedy. So it's really the setup for that. Right. And in terms of how quickly Tragedy comes out, Tragedy can come out as early as turn 5. So it's not like it's a slow thing. But that's the deck as a whole. The most important cards in the deck are definitely the UI Goku Kamehameha and Xeno Super Combo, because they are the cards that you use to try and force through your ramp.
Right.
When you swing in the early game, you want to pump up your leader enough for your opponent to say, if I combo over this, my hand is decimated, and if I let it through, he ramps, so they are stuck between a rock and a hard place. The reason the Zeno super combo is important for that is that you can act it like it's one of those pseudo super combos, like an Infernal Villainy Cell or an Unbreakable Goku or whatnot, because you can simply play it for one, draw a card, and then combo it off when you attack. And it gets exactly the same amount of value. It draws a card, and it works in exactly the same way. So it's essentially 8 copies of cards that that help you ramp. So there's a lot of obviously negates in there as well. I only found the need for 3D magics simply because there was not enough need to untap all the energy, as the Boo Unison untaps an energy, Galactic can untap energy, there's 4 beans in the deck. The Zeno Super Combo untaps energy. I just didn't see the need for any more than 3D magics, just for the odd random sparking. And I found that Shield's Army Reinforcements was generally better over the course of the game as a result. And the one Ready to Rumble extra negate is for those matchups where it can just stall out an extra turn because they don't want to lose all their energy. The last card to mention is the Great Saiyaman. And in some matchups, Great Saiyaman is MVP because Great Saiyaman is for those who don't know, Revenge Barrier blocker deflects that when he KOs a card, restands both himself and one of your energy. Now, that has an absolutely absurd interaction with Galactic Buster because of the timing of that you can choose on the autos and the effects. You could choose to deactivate the Great Saiyaman restand and untap energy prior to playing a Bojack and then resting for Galactic Buster, which means it can add to the 4 energy required to play a Bojack. But you could also delay its proc until after the Galactic Buster, which means that you could play a Bojack, rest in energy that doesn't exist for Galactic Buster, and then untap one with Great Saiyaman. So it really gives you that flexibility on that. And of course, it's your target for your Boo Chain. But don't be afraid to drop that card. If your opponent doesn't have easy barrier removal, then it is well worth it in this deck because you are running UI Kamehameha at 4. You're running Zeno Super Combo at 4. So if they want to kill the Great Saiyaman and they have to get over its revenge, you are not afraid to combo up to 35, even 40k on Great Saiyaman. It can really discourage people when you do so.
Awesome. Okay, great detail. I mean that's the thing where if you're playing this deck quite a lot, this is where you kind of land as far as the selection choices and just the text, and that kind of brings up to matchups. Let's kind of quickly go over through these since you played what is this 7 rounds? 7 rounds to the last, which was Dahan, which is very close. I do understand. But throughout these, you can kind of go through all of them if you like.
First, I'm going to give a huge shout out to Nick Menard, who was round 1, who had to actually leave like straight after round 1, and he made that clear and was going to give me the win regardless. And I basically asked him, so can we just at least have a practice game? And he was happy to give me one. So he gave me the win. Our practice game ended with him winning that one after he drew good off an aandroidd 17. But the Cell Surge matchup is very much 50-50 as to how that goes. Like, I've won 50% of them, I've lost 50% of them. They are they're a toss of a coin as to who draws the right cards at the right time, but huge shout out to him. Round 2, SS4 Reboot. Blue decks cannot beat this deck. The only blue deck that has a chance against this deck is this deck. SS3 stands no chance. Its hand is far too small, and my opponent can vouch for that. His hand dwindled massively as he was trying to avoid the pressure, and I was maintaining the amount of ramp that he was. So either he loses his hand by negating and ramping and bottom decking cards, or he allows the ramp, in which case we're both ramping at the same time, but I have 5 or 6 extra cards in hand. He also gets stuck because he gets stuck at 6 energy, whereas mine can go more, and he can't play enough threats to get through. So if you play enough with this deck, you'll know that no other blue decks can actually beat this. Some people say that aandroidd 16 will beat this deck, but no, this aandroidd 16 does not beat this deck, and obviously I played that later. King Cold's an interesting one, but as long as you see a couple of negates to negate the Unison Swing and the leader if and when you need to, there's really not much that they can actually do to threaten you. So you just tend to out-advantage them, and you've got bigger bombs than they do, and you can end the game more or less whenever you want as a result. Hatch is one of those decks that's decided that wants to slow the game down, and this deck does not lose the long game to anything. Hatch is no exception. They have to play through God Sealing, they have to play through Tragedy Overground, they have to play through Aandroidd 17, they have to accept the fact that they are on the back foot basically the whole time. And to understand what this means, like in this particular game, Hatch went first. He managed to play the 8-drop Gogeta before I had my Unison up because he had negated or blocked all my leader swings, obviously losing a fair bit of value in the meantime. The following turn, he swung with it a second time, but I bottom decked it with the Boo. So he got 4 cards ripped out of my hand, and like 1 card came off board, warped as well. But even that wasn't enough to stop it, because after that, my hand just ballooned back out to 11 or 12 cards, maybe even more. And he never got back into it. So even getting down their biggest bomb, it did nothing to change the result of the matchup. Dark Broly is another potentially 50-50 matchup, and it really depends as to how you draw. But the basic game plan is to just stay alive long enough to drop Tragedy. And if you can do that, then they can't play, because all their cards cost like 6. So if you can do that, then Dark Broly scoops. In the first game, I selected to allow a few hits through, and avoided using Baby Hatchak on the turn 3, because I wanted to save it for turn 4, because on turn 4 I used the SS4 Vegeta to ramp up to the 9 energy. Baby hatched that turn 4, and then turn 5 dropped Tragedy, which obviously ended that game. Right. Aandroidd 16 ramp is a similar story. They like it's a good powerful deck, but again, it can't deal with the size of your bombs, and you get there faster because you ramp faster than they do. They require the Aandroidd 16 2-drop to ramp, whereas all you need is your leader to hit, and your leader hitting is not difficult. Just remember that you don't mind comboing up pretty big, because if they've got a bunch of super combos in their hand, then they'll do that to avoid the ramp. But if you combo up to 25 or even 35k, then they're not stopping it. So you'll get the ramp in first, and once your Unison hits the board, they target the Unison so much that when you eventually result a training or Tragedy or other things later in the game, then they can't keep up. And the last matchup was the loss to Dark Broly with Daehan, which was unfortunate. It was an awesome game, but it really came down to the fact that on turn 2, I didn't have either a copy of Zeno or UI Kamehameha to combo with to help the ramp through. So I ended up just having to put a 10k swing on, because nothing else in my hand could afford to be dropped for it. Had I have had the extra targets to drop, either I would have gotten a ramp off, or Daehan would have lost 15k worth of combo power to stop it at minimum, or 20 if it was a UI. Which the game ended up coming down to me not being able to combo over a specific swing that I only needed 10k combo to combo over. So which meant the following Dark Broly wouldn't have been the killing blow. So it really was that close. And had I have gotten the extra ramp in, instead of dropping the Boo Unison on turn 3 would have been a 5 energy SS4, which would have stalled the game out long enough to drop Tragedy. So it was a great game with Daehan, but it really came down to the loss was due to not having the second ramp card in hand at that particular time in that moment.
And it happens. Yeah, it definitely happens. Yeah. Understandable.
And it's RNG.
Yeah, for sure. That's part of the card game, unfortunately. And yeah, and that kind of brings us to why this deck. You kind of explained it. You know, you wanted to play a blue deck. You've always been playing the blue decks, and kind of explained that before. So we can kind of skip through that into the turn by turn. So obviously the first turn is to make them take damage, right? Where's the rest?
Yeah. Okay, so the first turn or second turn, depending on what decks you're playing against, you want to make sure that you charge either a Bojack or a 7-drop Boo. And if you don't have one of those, you don't mind necessarily charging an Aandroidd 17 either, as long as you have a 10k combo in there so that Galactic Buster is live defensively. But you're trying to just push through either a Zeno super combo to draw a card and then swing with it, swing with your leader, or to UI Kamehameha and get some ramp off. Ideally, your turn 3 is when things get going, because on turn 3 you should have 4 energy, at minimum 5 if you went second and you got both ramps off. But on turn 3 going first, you have 4 energy. You drop the Boo Unison. You draw a card, and you sit back. Because you're at 4 energy on turn 3, not only can you play your Boo Unison, but you could also potentially Galactic Buster that following turn. Alternatively, if you had a 1-drop Boo on the board, you could have also gone for that route. And I went for that route against the Hat Check matchup, where they saved their Sparking Negate in hand for my leader's swing, and they saved the blocker on board for another swing, and the blocker got immediately hit by my 7-drop Boo because I played the 7-drop Boo. They had their Unison on board with 3 markers on it. I swung at their Unison, sucked up the blocker, and landed a triple strike on Unison on like turn 3, and so the Unison just died outright. And then they just lost their hand size immediately as a result. So you can really be flexible with this deck. It's not so much past turn turn 3 onwards. You don't want to be locked into one line of play. You really have to be quite flexible as to knowing what the right play is at the right time. Sometimes it'll be a Boo Unison, sometimes it'll be a Margin Boo, sometimes it'll leave your energy up for a Galactic Buster and Bojack play. It's very matchup dependent. Turn 4 is when it becomes somewhat more standardized, because turn 4 is generally the turn that you want to drop an SS4 Vegeta to help ramp and set yourself up for that late game. But again, it's not always the case. It is matchup dependent. Like if your opponent's going to God Sealing it, then you have to make the decision. Do you care if they God Seal it, and do you want to just burn through the God Sealings? Because you can do that in this deck. You can try and play an SS4, and if they God Sealing, that's fine. They may not have the God Sealing for the Bojack on their turn, because you can play on both turns. But in general, the goal of the deck is to use those first 3 turns to set yourself up for turns 5, 6, and 7 if needed, as your opponent can't play the late game with you. There is no other deck that plays the late game quite as well as this deck.
Right, and that's the biggest part of this deck, I think, which is great, honestly. And people will kind of figure out their own turns as you stated, because it's not going to be the same every time. But
yeah, like this deck is not an easy deck to play, so it will take practice to get right. But once you get it right, it is an extremely powerful deck. And I'll go out there on a limb and say it. I think this deck, when piloted well, is a tier 1 deck. It's just a matter of knowing the matchups and how to play it.
Interesting. Okay, and I believe it. Closing thoughts. Will you continue to play this deck through the special anniversary box, or are you gonna switch it up, or what?
Well, anyone who's paying really close attention would notice that there are absolutely no new cards in this deck. It was all from the prior set, and so that was built even knowing the new cards from this set. So I don't see any reason not to continue playing this deck, because it is just as strong now as it was a few weeks ago, and it's just as strong even looking at the anniversary box cards, like the new Bardock leader. SS4 engine is going to struggle against God Sealing. It's going to struggle against blue in general. The support for the yellow Broly archetype doesn't really change the way this deck plays, and it's not going to be killing you on turn 3 or 4. So you will win the long game against it as well. So I don't really see how the anniversary box changes the way this deck can play. So absolutely, I think this deck is playable for at least another few months until Bandai decides to either hit something in it, which I don't really think anything is necessary of being hit. You can discuss Android 17 another time, but I'm not really sure it's that necessary. And or releases something that hard counters the deck, which at this stage I don't see happening. So no, I think this deck is playable into the future.
For sure. Okay, I agree. And finally, do you have any shout outs, anything else like that?
Yep, shout out to my brother Timothy for being an awesome practice partner and training partner throughout the time. Shout out to Benny from Cardtastic Locals down here in Melbourne, who helped me get some practice games in a number of weeks ago, and is more than happy to chat on different ideas and whatnot. Shout out to Christelle and TAC for putting on an awesome event again. Shout out to the judges for running such a smooth event as per usual. Shout out to you for hosting me, and shout out to the wider Dragon Ball community for being so awesome and fun in these hard times where we're all struggling to find ways to play Dragon Ball, and everyone who's willing to hop online.
For sure, yeah. It's no problem from my end, if anything, and I totally agree. But that is it. Let us know what you think. Comment below if you have any questions, comments, concerns, outbursts, whatever it may be. It is time to go, Anthony. Wow, I rhymed. I'll see you guys in the next one. Say bye.
See ya.